Alright, so welcome. Today we're talking about supporting the fleet. We're going to talk about, it's kind of a big topic. All three of the classes that folks asked me to do were on really big topics. So we're going to focus on, I've decided to kind of hone in based on questions that were asked in the previous classes, as well as a few folks sent me DMs. We also got some questions in the anonymous class questions that kind of helped me focus on what we're going to talk about. But if you have questions related to anything about support roles in a fleet, this is absolutely the appropriate place to ask them. We're going to focus today on scouting and hunting because these are two roles that are similar, and they are important parts of any fleet, but especially in Brave, we have a need for scouts, we have a need for hunters. Um, if you are not in the Blop Sig yet, um, I highly recommend that you check it out, check the requirements, and if that's something that interests you, um, throw in an application. Um, so let's talk about what is scouting. So scouting is a lot of things, and it sometimes gets used interchangeably with hunting. But I'm going to use the two terms separately today to talk about two different things. So scouting is your eyes ahead, right? That's the person who, what they call plus oneing or jumping into the system ahead of the fleet, right? You're looking at D-scan, you're looking at local, and you're telling the FC, hey, here's what I see, right? You warp to the sun, you warp around the system a little bit to get a good D-scan of the entire system. Um, if you're not super comfortable using your D-scan, that's something I would highly recommend practicing if you want to scout. Once you've reached your target destination, scouts are oftentimes going to watch gates or watch a neighboring system for any plus plussing in the system, meaning if there are neutrals or hostiles that come into system, you're going to call that out to the FC straight away. And you may also be called upon to get initial tackle. Um, so sometimes um, you'll hear the FC, especially Allah. This is like Allah's favorite phrase, tackle commit, right? That's the command, and the expectation is that there's going to be a couple small ships, maybe some dictors, are going to just swarm in and try to get tackle on the target, right? So that is like it's not the main focus of scouting, but sometimes that is a thing that the FC will ask you to do. Now, what is hunting? Hunting is looking for content to kill. You're going to be exploring pockets. You're going to be exploring pipes. You're going to go further away from the fleet than a scout would because you're actively trying to find stuff to kill. Now, you don't want to get too far ahead of the fleet that they can't get to you in time, because if you die after you find something, well, now the fleet doesn't have its hunter. And usually you have more than one, but it's never a good thing to lose a hunter in a fleet, especially on a roam when you may be very far away uh, from reships. You may also be serving as eyes ahead, right? So if you have a place in mind, if the FC has told you, hey, here's our desto, this is where we're going to start, um, you might be acting as eyes ahead. You're plus oneing, jumping into the system ahead of the fleet, taking a quick D-scan, um, looking around and relaying that information back to the FC. FC, there's um, three newts in local, nothing on D-scan from the gate, warping to sun, right? Something like that. And then you just keep relaying information, and then when you get to where the FC wants to start hunting, then you start doing your thing. Sometimes you'll see things along the way and you get a little snack for the fleet, right? That's hunting. Okay. A more specialized version of hunting would be um, hunting with a Sino, and this is specific to blops, right? Um, you generally don't hunt with a Sino when you are in a regular fleet, um, because the FC and a few other people like support FCs are going to have Sino alts already in system or nearby, ready to light a Sino if needed. If you're on a regular fleet and you're doing scouting or hunting, you're usually not going to have a Sino. The kinds of fits that you're going to have are going to look like this. So you'll notice that these are interceptors plus an Atron. I wanted to share the Atron blah 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 words. I wanted to share the Atron fit because I want folks to know that even if you are just starting out in the game, or you're new to PvP so you don't have a lot of PvP skills trained, that's okay. A tackle Atron is just fine, and you can actually be effective, and get some good experience in an Atron. Those are all doctrine fits. You can find them in the in-game fittings under Alliance fittings, so don't feel like you have to save the fittings or anything like that. These are all part of our doctrines, and so a returning to the subject of hunter, a a Sino hunter might be in something as cheap as a Covops. So that's kind of what a Covops hunter is going to look like. Um, you've got the Sino, you've got an interdiction nullifier to get out of bubbles and whatnot. Everything else is pretty standard. Um, when you if you are really feeling fancy, you might update or upgrade to something like this, the Lachesis. Or sorry, this is an Arazu, not a Lachesis. You might upgrade to an Arazu, right? Um, it's more expensive. It also gets bonuses to range, um, so you are going to be slightly more effective, but you will still die if you are not careful. These things are not super tanked or anything like that. Any questions so far? We've talked about what is scouting, what is hunting, and we talked about Sino hunters.
I was thinking about the budget fit you linked. It seems rather fragile, so do you have any kind of practical tips on how you stay alive and get the Plops fleet drop before you die?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The buzzard is very fragile. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to rely on, for the buzzard, the strategy is to find the target, right? Get the fleet, make sure that the fleet is ready to jump. You're going to get tackle on the target, light the Sino, and pray, basically, because the buzzard will not live long. But if you can get if you can get even just one ship that can get secondary tackle on the target, then you can worry about getting another Sino in there. Um, this is typically how it went um, when we were doing a blues deployment in FDZ, out in Geminate. So a lot of the Blops battleships that would Sino in would get tackle, and then someone else would bring in another Sino at the same time and light a secondary Sino. So it's you know this is the most basic. It's not going to stay alive for very long. Basically, you're staying alive just long enough to get secondary tackle on it, and you want to have a secondary Sino ready to go before you decloak, before you try to get tackle with a buzzard.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, concerns, comments, conundrums? Let's talk about how you hunt. And this is a picture of a screenshot I took earlier today of Geminate, right? And over on the left side there is FDZ, right? And there's a little Brave logo next to it with a maroon, not maroon, a aquamarine circle. And over on the right hand side we have this big red circle, and there's a bunch of systems. There's a little pipe here, and it's got a bunch of green systems here. This is the NPC kill delta. This is information that you can access on .lan at any time, and this is going to tell us where we can find the crabs. And you can futz with the settings to change it to jumps. You can change it to ship and pod kills if you're looking for where any fighting has happened. You can also change what kinds of NPC data you're getting. So you can show NPC kills, which is just going to show the number of NPC kills in the last hour. You can set it to NPC kills for the last 24 hours. So then you're going to get a large aggregate number. But NPC kill delta is going to tell you in the last hour, has the amount of NPC kills gone up or down? And if it's gone up, chances are somebody is actively crabbing in that system. Now, granted, .lan is delayed, right? It's within the last hour. So somebody could have been hardcore crabbing in HJO, right? That's that dark green system right there with the plus 528. Somebody might be hardcore crabbing in that system, and by the time you get there, right, as a hunter, you might get there and there is nobody there. And you can check the ESS, look at how much money is in the main bank. If there's a lot of money, it probably means that the crabs got advance notice of you coming, right? Because keep in mind that our enemies are also using intel channels like we have intel channels, right? So somebody's reporting, hey, a bunch of brave goofballs are in our space. Watch out. Hey, they're heading to HJO. Watch out, right? So if the main bank has a bunch of money in it, that means that they only just stopped crabbing. Maybe they docked up, right? And so you might tell the FC, hey, there's a lot of money in the main bank. Let's rob it. We can maybe bait out a fight that way. Or you might tell the FC, if we if we leave system now, we might be able to bait out the crabs, right?
Yeah, go ahead,
What
commander.
exactly was the class about?
So this class is this is the third class in a series of classes that people requested. The first was FCing, the second was PvP, and this one is supporting the fleet. So we're talking about support roles, which is a really big topic, right? And based on the
Well,
questions that I got yesterday and the day before, um, I have focused in on scouting and hunting. But if you have questions about other types of support in a fleet, I'm absolutely happy to talk about those if you have questions about that.
alrighty, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was supposed to ask that. What's your favorite tool for target searching? Because there's a number of options available.
Yeah, that's true. So there are three that I know of, right? I use Dotlan just because it's in my browser and I know how to use it. There's also SMT, which I know a lot of people prefer because it has more features and the data is a lot more legible. Um, there's also one called Rift, which I know a lot of folks use when they're crabbing as a sort of um, extra extra help to keep eyes on intel and stay alert when they're crabbing. Um, those are the three tools that I know of. But I just stick with Dotlan because I know how to use it because it's relatively easy to use, um, and so I like that a lot. Dotlan is not perfect though. It doesn't get updated very often, so there's a lot of little weird things about Dotlan because it doesn't get updated very often. I think it gets updated maybe once every year or so at best. There's a comment in the chat that says the tools depend on the intel. Yes and no. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, so you're talking about like when you're using Rift while you're crabbing. If the intel channel gives bad intel, then Rift isn't going to alert you that there's something wrong. Yeah, yeah, that's true. But the way I'm talking about using Rift is using it very similar to the way I'm talking about using Dotlan, right? Which does not rely on how good the intel is that's being reported in our intel channels. Um, the way I'm talking about using Rift is actively searching Rift for content, right? For indications of content. Where's crabbing happening, right? I, I've said this. I said this in one of the other classes, but I don't use Rift because it's very resource intensive, right? So if you multi-box and you have Rift up, it can really slow down your computer, which is a thing that really annoys me. I don't like it when my computer slows down. Um, I don't use SMT because I'm not a very tech savvy person. I stick to um, SMT is a little bit more. You get it off GitHub and you unpack it and install it yourself. It's a little more DIY than I'm comfortable with. Um, so, but if you are even the slightest bit technically savvy, um, you might like SMT. Um, for all the features that it has on it. So give one of those a try. I'm showing you Dotlan as a very basic example, but you can do the same things with SMT and Rift, and you might even be able to do more because have um, both of those programs have more features than Dotlan does.
Well, I have a question which I wouldn't say it's so much um, that I don't know, but maybe a question kind of like for those that probably don't know. I would kind of ask about overview settings.
Hmm.
Like I don't hear people often discuss it. Now I have my overview settings and I kind of follow the Z to S or whatever ones
Yeah,
and kind of
ZTech S
customize it.
overview.
Right,
Yep.
right. So I kind of started with that as a base, and then I've just been kind of progressively improving it over time. I have a variety of different tabs and all that for different things. But I
Hmm.
don't know, like, how often do we discuss this, especially with newer players that might be a little bit more intimidated with the complexity of the overview, for example. Like, what
Yeah.
would, like, how would we approach like teaching folks about the overview? Like, what would be a good starting point, for example?
Um, so to start, I would just share the ZTech S overview channel, which has instructions on how to um, uh, get the overview up and running. Um, then I then I would say, like if you have if you want to do a specific thing, right? How do what do you want to do? If you want to mine, right? If you're a miner and that's like a big thing for you, you might want to um, set up your tabs so that at least one of the tabs is mining, right? Has all the mining things that you could want. And if you're focused on a specific type of mining, let's say you really go hard for the ice mining, right? So um, you might set up a mining tab and have, um, you might pick one of the settings that's specific for mining, right? And I just walk people through that, right? Now, being a PvP fanatic, I oftentimes will coach people through setting up a tab specific for um, flying around while cloaked, right? I have a tab on my overview that's just called Cloaky, right? And creating a new tab is very simple, right? There's a little plus sign on your overview next to all your tabs. And once I've got that, I set it to, I think it's just called PvP Collidables. And what it does is it makes every single thing that is an object in space, um, it brings it up on your overview. So that way, if you are flying around cloaked, you can see every single object that might decloak you, right? Which is super important if you're going to be, um, if you're in like a cloaky Loki, right? If you're hunting in a cloaked ship, it is very important that you know what might decloak you around you, especially if you're trying to get like um, like an Ishtar or a Marauder that's crabbing, right? And you don't want to get decloaked too early because you're trying to surprise them. Having a tab dedicated to um, having a tab that's dedicated to cloaky or being cloaked that allows you to see all the collidables is super useful. Um, but really, it is just asking players, what is it that you like doing in this game, right? And then walking them through, okay, so now that you've got ZTAC-S overview set up, let's set up your tabs specifically for what you want to do in this game, right?
Yep. I'd like to also add something in case anyone isn't familiar with this. So you can actually have more than one group of tabs, which is also nice. In other words, you can have multiple overviews, not just multiple tabs. So you could
Yeah.
potentially have like a main group where you actually, see ships like targets. Like if you're into PvP, you'll have targets. And something that I like to do, I like to have a smaller subset of tabs that don't show ships or anything, but like for example, will show me gates, or for example, planets, moons, things of that nature, like warpables. So I'll have my main overview that shows my targets that I'm trying to kill, and then I'll have right above that a smaller window with, for example, warp out points, anything from moons to planets, so that if I need to escape and try and save my pod for whatever reason, it's right there. All I have to do is click and warp.
That's
For example.
excellent. I love that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
I love that. I also have a separate window. Yeah, so you can, in addition to creating new tabs, you can create new windows, which is what Commander Spock is talking about there. You can create new windows and you can size them any way you want, right? I have a second window that shows just command desis. Now, command destroyers are a huge problem in fleet fights, where especially when I was in no vacancies, because you'd have two or three of them. They'd be 200, maybe 300 kilometers off, and then within a moment's notice, they'd warp to 100, and all of a sudden, they'd boosh right on top of the fleet, and then a second one would boosh the Logi wing or half the fleet off of the rest of the fleet to split the fleet, and now you're scrambling, right? So it was very important to be able to see command desis, because then I, in a hick, right, with my long points, can try to snag those desis before they can get their boosh off, and hopefully protect the fleet from getting split.
Well, that's an interesting mechanic that I have not fully experienced yet. The command destroyers.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, I spent a long time away from the game, kind of a very long, over a decade hiatus, and none of this existed back then. I don't know. I have kind of a split view on that mechanic. I kind of think that something like that should be, you can only use it for allies, like you're trying to move your own fleet. Yeah, the idea that you can move hostile ships against their will is kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's a mechanic that can be easily exploited. But again, that's just, I guess I haven't been in this game for so long, and I've only, like, maybe within the last 6-7 months I started playing, so I haven't really experienced that side of it.
Sure.
The whole getting booshed off the field hundreds of kilometers and whatnot. It's like I haven't experienced that yet. It seems like it could be annoying.
It is very annoying, and it can cost you the fight. But I would say a few different things. One is that it doesn't happen in nullsec nearly as much as it does in wormhole space. So, I probably could have gotten rid of my window, but I keep it anyways because I like to be able to see that information. And two, I think that just as people came up with the idea to use these command destroyers this way, people also came up with techniques for defending against it. So, like, one example is you have a hick in the fleet, right? You can keep a hick bubble up, and that prevents the Booshers from being able to warp right in on the fleet, right? Um, so you keep that bubble up, and that's a that's your defensive bubble, keeps the Booshers from being able to warp in, and then you know um, you have Hick pilots who have long range points that can point the Desis, the command Desis, as soon as they get into range, and that's a tricky thing to do. Not gonna lie, but if you practice it, um, you get good at it, and so you know it's a thing. Um, it can sometimes feel very broken because um, when it happens to you, it doesn't feel good. And I've been on the receiving end of some nasty boosh plays where people have split the fleet and we've taken significant losses because of it. It didn't feel good, especially when I was the Hick pilot that was trying to get point on the command destroyers. It didn't feel good to lose people, but yeah,
That'll happen.
it's definitely not. It's definitely not. Um, oh, if you have a command desi in your fleet, you're gonna win the fight, right? It's not. It's not
Right.
that good.
Right. It's an annoying strategy that, when pulled off, can pretty much split a fleet and cause the fight to go entirely different direction.
Yeah, and even when it does happen, it doesn't necessarily mean that the fleet that got split is going to lose. In fact, Horde did this to us uh, like 3 weeks ago, I want to say, and they just didn't capitalize on it. They did not effectively, like, they got the Boosh off, they split our fleet in half, but then they didn't even they didn't even effectively use that to their advantage. They didn't take us out. They didn't kill all of our Logi or anything like that. They just annoyed us, is what they did. It was just annoying. It was like, okay, you split the fleet, and now we have to kind of regroup, but whatever. Like, it was fine. So, you know, a good boosh like that can be devastating, but also it requires a lot of coordination on the part of the person doing the boosh, which is itself a tricky thing to pull off. It requires some serious skill, and then it requires good communication between that person and the enemy FC to be able to get it to be able to actually use that boosh play effectively to kill something. So I'm gonna call the class here. But I'm going to hang out for a few minutes if there are any last minute questions that people have. Thank you so much for coming. I am leaving Brave later today, so thank you for coming to my last class as a member of Brave. I wish you all the very best. Fly dangerously, friends.